3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Welcome to Roots of Reality. My name is Ben Baumann, and today I'm going to be talking about the history of economic crises. So throughout human history, economic crises have been a reoccurring problem facing human societies. For example, going back to the Roman Empire, there are documented financial crises which have wreaked havoc on Roman society. For instance, about 2,000 years ago, in year 33, a government regulation was enforced in the Roman Empire, restricting the rules for which loans were able to be given out, in turn causing many to cancel loans they had given out, which in turn led to those in debt being unable to pay off their debts, greatly damaging the Roman economy. As a result, showing the dangers of bad economic policies, and this has been something that has continuously been a problem where various nations around the world enact policies that they think will be beneficial to society, but yet instead actually cause more harm than good. Additionally, financial crises can be caused by supply and demand problems, as well as public fear. In fact, this was the main cause of an event known as the Great Depression in 1929 in the United States, where various problems led to a decline in spending, causing a decline in production. And as a result, many people began desperately selling off their stock market investments out of fear of falling production levels. In addition, people also began pulling their money out of banks, crushing the economy, leading to a global financial crisis, since all nations that had economic ties to the United States would also suffer as well. Now, other causes of financial crises historically include things like a lack of global oil supply, which occurred during the Fourth Arab-Israeli War in 1979, and this is because the world runs on oil. So when oil supplies are hindered, there is a major domino effect which disrupts crucial industries all over the world. In addition, something to look out for in the future regarding oil are the potential economic disasters that could occur in different nations, which are heavily dependent on oil production for their financial benefit. And this is because when the world eventually moves away from oil as the primary energy resource, given the issue of climate change, which is caused by fossil fuels like oil, and the fact that oil is a limited resource that won't last forever, when alternative energies become predominant in society, nations will stop buying oil. So oil exporters like various Middle Eastern nations and countries like Russia, which have these one-dimensional economies based solely around the ability to export oil, could find themselves in big financial trouble in a post-oil world if they do not plan ahead and try to diversify their economy. Then there's also the danger of national debt, which caused economic disasters all over Latin America when nations took on excessive debt, and so much so that eventually could no longer pay off their debt. And this is what occurred in the 1980s in an event known as the Latin American debt crisis. And finally, there is also the issue of bad banking practices, where banks give out loans they shouldn't be giving out. And this was a primary cause of the Great Recession in the United States in 2007, where you had lots of banks giving out loans to people that historically would never qualify for them. This then resulted in a domino effect of issues, causing an increase in housing prices, causing increased interest rates, which then decreased home values, and thus those people with loans that had adjustable interest rates, meaning interest rates could be increased or decreased based on the market, these people with those type of interest rates could no longer afford to pay off their loans and couldn't use their devalued homes as a way of borrowing more money, nor could sell them for profit. And this all eventually led to the collapse in the housing market, and banks finding themselves in serious financial trouble, struggling to give out new loans, which wreaked havoc all over the global economy, since businesses without loans had to cut their expenses, causing many to lose their jobs and the demand for products to decrease. And now, today, we find ourselves in another financial crisis of sorts in the modern world, and this is because of the global pandemic, which has caused major economic issues all over the world, causing unhealthy fluctuations in supply and demand and supply chain problems, as well as inflation, where the cost of various things is now increasing more and more all over the world, and just putting a lot of stress on many families all over global society. So therefore, economic crises is not exactly a well understood topic. It's a complicated topic, but it is something that continuously affects human societies again and again and again, and in what seems to be almost every generation. And so we need to figure out a way that we can stop having so many financial crises over and over and over again. So in the future, nations must be careful about doing things like enacting major economic policies without being certain that they are going to be beneficial, because instead they could potentially cause big problems and do more harm than good. Additionally, we must also do our best to balance societal supply and demand. This means ensuring critical global resources are not lacking in supply, but also not oversupplied. And we must work towards creating balanced financial budgets. Having lots of debt is not a good thing, because when debts can no longer be managed, you can collapse your economy. So it's fine to borrow money to a certain extent, and obviously nations with large global economies and lots of influence like the United States can get away with having high amounts of debt. But that's not something you want to keep gambling with and assuming that everything's going to be fine if you have tons and tons of debt. And then there's regulating the banking industry so that those loaning money out are doing so responsibly. Because at the end of the day, the banking industry is way too important to society, and we shouldn't be reckless with it. And finally, we need to start paying more attention to natural disasters like climate change and pandemics, which can tear through our societies, causing economic chaos, whether it's through damage to various infrastructure from these superstorms that could be going on all over the world, and increasing heat levels and increasing water levels. And when it comes to pandemics, if you have lots of people dying and people are struggling to keep society functioning as normal because you cannot get rid of some type of virus in check, that's a major problem. If we don't start taking these natural disasters seriously, in the future when they happen again, and when they get worse, we will be in even bigger trouble than we are now. After all, historically, COVID-19, though it is very bad and it is a significant issue, and it's way worse than a flu pandemic, it is by far not the worst pandemic that has ever hit human society. And so if you think our economy is bad right now because of our inability to fight off a pandemic, just wait until the pandemic is way worse than it currently is. So with that, at the end of the day, it's all about balance when it comes to managing an economy. Like many aspects of maintaining a successful society, when we start taking the need for balance for granted, bad things happen. And we also have to keep in mind that we are a globalized society. All countries are connected economically. We cannot act like we don't need to work with other nations to solve our problems, because that is a losing strategy. So there really is no going back at this point. Our economies are all so interconnected, it is essentially impossible to disconnect them from each other without making things even worse economically. And as a result, we are basically in this together whether we like it or not. And we must start solving problems together. Now, there will be some who believe that capitalism is the cause of economic crises and socialism is the way to go. And this is interesting because on paper, obviously many socialist ideas appear great. The idea of a society with complete economic equality and one where everyone's taken care of and poverty is not really a problem and everyone's equal, that's all great. The problem is that actually getting that is way harder than people who are commonly promoting socialism like to think. It's very idealistic and nothing in the world is ideal. And achieving this ideal society really doesn't exist because there's always going to be more problems that you didn't think of. In addition, in practice, there has been no historical resemblance of this type of society, despite various socialist experiments. In fact, many socialist societies had a lot of poor people, but they still had enormous inequality because you had lots of people basically controlling the country which were enriching themselves. You can see that in the Soviet Union, for example. In turn, this has resulted in many promoters of socialism claiming it is only because no one has implemented socialism properly. However, this is a statement really without substance, considering, again, there is no historical evidence of a socialist society ever being successful. And instead, socialist societies throughout human history have been much worse off than capitalist ones, suffering from limited innovation and extreme poverty. So, saying that no one's done it right is really kind of a cop-out, because perhaps no one's done it right for a reason, because it doesn't work. So I think anyone would love to have a society where the ideals of complete equality exist. Unfortunately, we're not seeing that right now. And we have never seen that. And there's no evidence to believe that we will see that. Most of existence in life is really just about doing the best you can, because perfection really is just non-existent. Thus, societal economics is highly complex, and the examples I've given are only a handful of potential causes which can take down a nation's economy. Now, there are clearly plenty of flaws with modern global capitalism, which suggests there is certainly need for more regulation in many aspects of the system to prevent economic crises. Yet at the same time, too much regulation can also cause economic crises. So despite its flaws, it is still the best system we have historically, and can be more successful and more beneficial and create greater equality if it is given the right balance and protected from external forces like natural disasters. So it is our choice as a society to either make things better or let things get worse. But we are here today, right now. So what world do you want to live in? Choice is up to you. As always, remember, billions of years led to you, so make the most of it.